Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Nicholas and I will be guiding you through this presentation together with my colleagues Ruben, Ingmar and Pideo. Today we are going to give you some more details on the situation in China. As we all know, China is facing some major issues, but it still remains a country, or better yet, an economy with a lot of potential. That is why we wanted to investigate these matters, because given our topic, wishful thinking, we wondered if investing in China would be a good idea. In the following 10 to 15 minutes, we will describe the situation in China from different angles and determine if there is some money to make. In this presentation, we will focus on China's energy problem and also zoom in on the Chinese currency. But first of all, Pitiran will tell you something more about China in general.
First of all, did you know that 20% of world's population are Chinese people? 20%, it's amazing, isn't it? With over 1.3 billion people, China has the largest population in the whole world. So it's not surprising that it's the second most. So it's not surprising that the Chinese economy is the second most important economy in the world, with a GDP of about $10 trillion. 10 trillion, that's 10 with 12 zeros. From 1949 to late 1978, the economy was centrally planned, or as we like to call it, Soviet style. So there was no capitalism, no private businesses. But since the economic liberalization in 1978, the economy has grown 90 times bigger and is the fastest growing major economy in the world.
Interesting, isn't it? But let's get down to business now and go to the first topic of today, China's energy problem. When you look at China, we see that it is the biggest developing country in the world. Its energy consumption has increased substantially in the last decade due to its rapid economic growth. As a matter of fact, China is the world's largest energy consumer since 2009, as you can see in the graph. It will outrun the United States by far in the future. This energy is needed for the further economic expansion to meet with the growing needs of the 1.3 billion population. But there are troubles ahead because fossil fuel prices are gradually increasing, and these type of fuels are also damaging the environment. But right now, Ruben and Ingmar are going to tell you something more about these kind of problems.
I would like to start by explaining the main cause of the environmental damage. The main cause is coal, and the fact that 75% of the Chinese energy is provided by coal. Coal is a fossil fuel that has a very negative impact on the environment. The combustion of coal causes the emission of toxic air pollutants like SO2. And in China, the problem is becoming acute, because a large portion of the coal is not washed or sorted. And on top of that, the Chinese coal is used inefficiently. All these environmental issues aren't doing China any good. And neither was the fact that in 2006, China passed the US as the world's largest greenhouse emitter.
And next to coal, there is also oil, which is used to produce energy for China. But for more than 40% of its oil, China depends on imports. And with the rising fossil fuel prices, this could be a major constraint for the further economic development and economic growth in China. So what could the problems be? Political instability, a loss of jobs. So we clearly see that the energy sector in China is a bottleneck, so China will need a very well energy plan for the future.
The way China uses its energy is, by the way, highly inefficient. To produce the same energy output as other industrial countries, China needs 3 to 4 times more energy resources due to its inefficient energy systems. By using conservation programs, China has made an important progress on this topic, and if it hadn't made this effort, its energy shortage would be even bigger right now. But not to worry, China has a number of renewable energy alternatives which could be the solution to their problem.
Renewable energy sources have two major advantages. First of all, they are renewable everlasting, and therefore there is no variability in the fuel costs of those energy sources. Fossil fuels, on the other hand, aren't protected against international price changes. And let's be honest, if you can choose between investing in clean energy, what will pay off big time on the long term, or investing in technology to reduce pollution of fossil fuels, what would you choose? Of course, go for clean energy.
That's right, Mr. Jan. And that is exactly what China is doing. For instance, last summer they invested 5 trillion yuan. That's about 740 billion US dollar. So that's a lot. And these investments were in an alternative energy plan to develop new and renewable energy sources, like there are geothermal, biomass, unconventional natural gas, nuclear, and these kind of energy sources. And according to the report of the Nuclear Energy Agency, this could mean a reduction in emission of CO2 by 1.2 billion tons and by 7.8 billion tons in SO2. It could also create a lot of new jobs, at about 15 million new jobs in China, and also it would create 1.5 trillion yuan in value.
Those who have been watching the international clean energy race know that China is already on its way to becoming the world leader in green energy. 1.3% of China's gross domestic product is created by this sector, and at the moment only Denmark is doing better with an amazing 3.1%. When you look at these numbers, it's clear that this sector is booming, and therefore we think it's a good idea to make some investments in green energy in China, because in the future they will probably pay off big time. But let's move over to the second topic of today, the Chinese currency. Ruben?
Thank you, Nicholas. The official Chinese currency is the renminbi, and its primary unit is the yuan. As China evolved from a central planning economy to a free market economy in the late 70s and increased its participation in foreign trade, the renminbi was devalued to increase the competitiveness of the Chinese industry. Also nowadays, China is doing everything to keep competitive, but as you will see in the following fragment, an appreciation of the renminbi seems highly inevitable.
It all starts here in a factory in China, workers producing stuff for Americans to buy. When these products get shipped to the United States, somebody pays this factory, an American businessman, and of course he would pay in his country's currency, the US dollar, for the goods. So if we follow the money, US dollars go to a factory owner in China. That's useless currency for him. The Chinese owner needs to change that money into renminbi in order to pay for labor, electricity, any of the costs needed to run a factory. So he goes to the bank. If you imagine Chinese businessmen across the country running to the banks to buy renminbi, then the price of the renminbi should go up. But it doesn't, because the government pumps more renminbi into the system to keep its price down. That is where the US says the manipulation takes place.
This all gets messier because the banks here now have a big problem. They have all these American dollars exchanged from Chinese businesses, and there's not much they can do with them.
When the Chinese government buys those dollars, it holds them, and it has to invest them. And China has voiced a lot of concern over the past year or so about really the only option that it has is to invest in the US treasuries, and it doesn't get a very high return on that.
It's a vicious cycle for China. The main benefit is to keep exports cheap, but there are drawbacks. With so much Chinese currency around, there's the danger of inflation.
In China, it's often portrayed as though this is the US putting pressure on China and if China strengthens the renminbi, it's good for the United States and it's bad for China. But in fact, moving towards a more flexible exchange rate and a stronger renminbi could actually be good for China.
But any time a tightly controlled monetary policy needs changing, there will be a lot of pain involved. Pain a Chinese leadership concerned with stability is hesitant to inflict. So up to now, the strategy has simply been one of delay. But both the Chinese and Americans know something must budge.
As you have heard, the renminbi isn't appreciating because the Chinese government is pumping it back into the system to keep its price down. In 2005, the government depegged the renminbi from the US dollar and allowed it to float in a managed floating exchange rate. Beijing may be getting a bit more flexible, but they're not willing to allow the rates to float completely.
That's true, but due to this increased exchange rate flexibility, we have seen that in the period 2005-2008, the yuan has rose 20% against the dollar. But in the financial crisis, the renminbi was again pegged to the US dollar, so further increase was not possible. But crawling out of the financial crisis, we see that the yuan is unpegged again, and economists believe that in the future a further increase of the yuan is inevitable.
And that is why we think it's a good time to consider the yuan, given all these indications of an appreciation. This currency investment should lead to a nice return. Because like my professor of macroeconomics used to say, when everybody expects an appreciation, there will occur an appreciation. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So now that you're up to speed with the situation in China, I think we can end here. To find out if these investments are really good investments or just wishful thinking, you should read our paper. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much.